certainly would summarize my faith journey in growing up in a Catholic family in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm a cradle Catholic, so I come from a tradition of Catholics well within my family. And so Catholicism was always a part of my faith journey. It continues to be part of my faith journey. It was through my grandparents and my parents that I came to love the faith, and that I'm sure that faith journey also has helped me in terms of choosing religious life. And so I come from a tight-knit, close family of believers, Catholic believers, and even though I struggled at one point with my faith, they still gave me the leeway to do that, but yet I found myself coming back to the Catholic faith. So my family and relatives, that's where it all began. And then I believe it was continued by me attending Catholic, certainly elementary school and Catholic high school. Catholic elementary school is where I met and fell in love with the Sisters of Notre de Namur, the community of which I now am a member. And I certainly had women religious and priests in our parish church, St. Martin de Porres Parish. That certainly was always about empowering people and always about making the faith real, so that when people came on Sunday or whatever, they received some message of liberation. They received some message of, no matter how difficult times were, God is able, and that God will always see us through. And so I contribute and am grateful for all of that, for my family, my friends, the men and women religious who also helped nurture my faith. What I have learned, particularly from other Black Catholics, is the steadfastness of our faith. That no matter what has come our way, God has never, ever abandoned us. And even though we go through trials and tribulations, there is this sense that God's love is unconditional, and that God will provide us all that we need in the right time and in the right place. And so there's that sense of resilience. There's that sense of faithfulness. There's that sense of it's going to be all right. There's the sense of celebration. There's the sense of thankfulness for all that God has done, is doing, and will continue to do. What I have learned from members of the Sisters of Notre de Namur, and also the National Black Catholic Sisters Conference that I've been a member of, again, is that as women religious, we are here to serve. For us in particular, as Sisters of Notre de Namur, we are here to serve those men, women, and children who are most abandoned, who are powerless, and we are there to be in solidarity with them. We are there to walk side by side with them. We are there to pray with them, and we are with them to advocate for social justice and to advocate for economic reform, if you will, and that we are there with them to be the good news of what the Catholic social teachings calls us to. Certainly, I would say that my formation, even within my own religious community, I experienced both overt and covert acts of racism. I mean, growing up also in New Haven, Connecticut, there was, and in some respects continues to be, a racial divide. So all my life, I certainly have been exposed to systemic racism, and yet I've also have learned how to not only survive, but how to live through that, and also how to thrive, so that those young men and women who come behind me, hopefully I will be able to make it just a little brighter and a little better for them on their journey. There have been times when I have visited some of our convents that have been in the suburbs, and I have arrived perhaps late at night, and they are in predominantly white communities. And so I have been pulled over by the police, wanting to know where I was going, who I was. So those certainly are examples. I have unfortunately had the experience of even going to our convents and knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell, and the sisters not sure of who I was. And even though I had my Notre Dame cross on, they were still suspicious about who this black woman was knocking on the convent door. I certainly have been in stores. I certainly have been followed, on many occasions, during many times. Certainly, when some of the sisters and I have been, when we were looking for apartments to live in, I certainly would make the calls, and we would show up at the apartment complex or the house, and then realize all of a sudden that the apartment was rented, simply based on the fact that I was African American and black, and that was clear to me and the other sisters as well. Well, I certainly think that it was and continues to be a wake-up call. I think systemic racism has been embedded in every single one of the systems that exist in the United States. And so we have seen how racial prejudice plus the misuse of power has impacted all of our social systems, whether it's economic, political, legal, and unfortunately also our beloved institutional church. And so with the demonstrations that have taken place, it has been and continues to be a call that we as church, we as people of God, need to be able to have honest conversations about how we are all impacted by systemic racism, and how racism continues to play itself out, and how it really hinders all of us from being in right relationships with each other. And so therefore, I believe the rallies and demonstrations, particularly on behalf of the millennials and young people, are saying America is better than that, that there should be equal access for all people, and not just based on the color of one's skin. So I've been pleased with the demonstrations, quite honestly. I participated in the demonstrations myself, because I do believe it is what we are called to do as people of God. Again, I think what it says about our country is that the very foundation of our country has been rooted in systemic racism, oppression, and marginalization, and people have suffered because of that. And so what we need to do in some respects is to go back to the Catholic social teachings. The Catholic social teachings basically says that every single individual is to be respected. Every single individual should have access to that which will allow him or her not only to survive, but to thrive. And that every single person has gifts and skills that they bring. And we have to, as church, as people, we have to find a way to embrace that, and to acknowledge that sinfulness of systemic racism, but also to say that we are more than that. You know, we are made in the image and likeness of our good and gracious God, and that's how we should start acting and behaving. And you can begin to see institutions, our religious institutions, as well as other systems, beginning to say we have to do better. Meaning we need to begin to look at our systems and institutions and to get a better idea of whose voices are not included, whose voices are left out, and ways of bringing those voices to the table so we can create equity and inclusion for everyone. Well, I think first of all, the Catholic Church, institutional Catholic Church, needs to ask for forgiveness. We know that the Catholic Church in the United States was one of the largest slave stakeholders. We know that. We know that many of our institutions within the Catholic Church actually own slaves. And so to admit to that sinfulness first and foremost, and then to acknowledge what must we do in order to repair that breach. And in order to do that, we then have to look at all the systems that are impacted or make up the Catholic Church and begin to put resources and personnel in those places that can help uplift and build the Black and brown Catholic community.
And what about individual Catholics? You know, people in the pew. What can they do?
I think certainly people in the pew. First of all, we can get to know each other. I mean, in many of our churches now, I mean, we have churches that are multicultural. We have churches that are multi-ethnic. And I think what we have to begin to do in those places is to have conversation and dialogue with each other. You know, to talk about the oppression and the systemic racism, and to be able to have those conversations with integrity, and to be able to embrace the contributions and the gifts that the people in the pew bring to the Catholic Church. And so we need to celebrate we need to celebrate all our ethnicities. We need to find ways of having those conversations with each other, and have those conversations of how together do we build the beloved community. I certainly think it is. I mean, we certainly have Sundays now. Well, not right now because of the pandemic, but certainly in terms of having Sundays where we bring different foods, where we can come together and break bread together, and also be able to learn about each other's culture, or to learn about what we have in common, as opposed to what keeps us separated and apart. Again, what has sustained my faith is basically what I have learned from my ancestors, and that the spirituality and faith is what will always be there. And so, always trusting and believing in the goodness of God, trusting and believing that God has created me in the image and likeness of our Savior, and that I am not junk, but that I am precious in the eyes of God. And so I stand on the shoulders of those men and women, my ancestors who have gone before me, who were steeped in their faith, so that no matter what they went through, whether it was lynching or Jim Crow or voter suppression, there was that sense that it is not to be that way, that every single individual is embodied with God's goodness. So in a sense, that's what has sustained my faith. In terms of the movement, the struggle, if you will, I have seen good men and women who believe that justice is for everyone. And so that I have seen good men and women participate in nonviolent demonstrations. I have seen good men and women call for policy reform. I have seen good men and women push for just legislation. I mean, I have seen those good role models, you know, whether it's been people like my grandparents or whether it's men and women like our beloved John Lewis, who, as we both know, talked about keeping your hand to the plow and being part of good trouble. Those movements have kept me going. What I am hopeful about is young people. I really believe that the millennials are young people who are making connections. I believe millennials are the young people who believe in equality, who believe in equity, and who are willing to demonstrate that, and to share that. And I'm impressed with what I see in terms of the millennials wanting even to take things further than what we have been able to do. Honestly, it is good news. I certainly rejoice. It's also a very historic moment. For those of us who are African American Catholics, to have the first African American cardinal named is just wonderful. I think that Pope Francis also particularly understood that there's much healing that certainly needs to take place with the Catholic Church in the United States. And so I think he's made a wise decision in calling forth a holy man, in calling forth a man who is not perfect, but a man who really listens to the people, a man who is steeped in his faith, and a man who will journey with the people. So I'm just blessed. I'm grateful. I personally know Archbishop Gregory, and I'm elated. I'm happy. I want to support him, and in particular, I keep him close in prayer. What I know about Archbishop Gregory is his ability to listen. his ability to be able to listen to diverse opinions and to try to find the common threads that somehow can unite people. And yet, he's also a man of integrity. He's a man also rooted in prayer and his faith. So he doesn't back away from his beliefs. He doesn't back away from his beliefs. But what I know he does try, what I have seen him do, is to try to bring people together to look at how do we make it better? How do we bring the good news to all God's people?